The Guild is Maximum Lawyers' community of legal entrepreneurs who are taking their businesses and lives to the next level. As a Guild member, you'll build relationships, be held accountable, and learn strategies specifically designed to get you unstuck and accelerate your plan for growth. Members are also granted exclusive access to masterminds hosted around the country. Our next event is coming up, and we're heading to Scottsdale, Arizona. There's something truly magical about the power of these in-person connections where real-time breakthroughs happen. Picture this. You're surrounded by like-minded law firm owners tackling your business and mindset challenges together. The energy is electric, the insights are transformative, and the results are game-changing. Investing in yourself is the best decision you'll ever make. The knowledge, strategies, and breakthroughs you'll gain are priceless assets that will supercharge your practice and propel you forward. Join the Guild and secure your ticket to Scottsdale at the best possible price by visiting maxlawevents.com.
Run your law firm the right way. This is the Maximum Lawyer Podcast. Your hosts, Jim Hacking and Tyson Mutrux. Let's partner up and maximize your firm. Welcome to the show.
Welcome back to the Maximum Lawyer Podcast. I'm Jim Hacking.
And I'm Tyson Mutrux. What's up, Jimmy?
Oh, Tyson, long time no see. This is our second episode we recorded today. We haven't done that in a long time, have we?
No, we sounds like we might be finding another time this week to record. So might be 3 in 1 week.
Yeah, we have to get some in the can because summer's approaching and we always have to have some in the backlog.
You got vacations coming up, trips to go on, things like the jury trials opening back up. You never know. So a lot of fun.
Well, let me go ahead and introduce our guest. His name is Dave Ahrens. He's the founder and CEO of the Unbundled Attorney and works hand in hand across all departments to help that company's growth and mission. He's a scratch golfer. He's an avid traveler. He's traveling right now. He's been to over 30 countries, and he's passionate about inspiring business leaders to become more socially conscious. That's awesome. Dave, why don't you tell us a little bit about Unbundled and about your journey to today?
Sure. Yeah. So Unbundled Attorney is a network of unbundled attorneys all across the United States that provide unbundled legal services, also known as limited scope representation, discrete task representation, depending on the state you're in. And that's just, attorneys that are willing to limit the scope of their involvement down to specific agreed upon tasks rather than requiring all clients to pay them, traditional upfront retainer fee and only offer full representation. So, we can get into more of the details on what that means and how that functions. But, originally my background, I've been in the legal industry my entire life as a non-lawyer. My background is in the legal access plan. I got started with legal access plans. Most people would be familiar with, Hyatt Legal Plans and ARAG. So I worked for a legal access plan company, and I was in the division that would build out the attorney networks for the legal plan, as well as helping the consumers with obtaining legal help. And the challenge that we had, pretty much every day was how do we get these people affordable legal services? And it was frustrating sometimes to, try to connect them with lawyers. And through the legal plan, lawyers used to be able to would be providing them with a discounted rate, usually 25% off. It's pretty typical for most legal access plan companies. And, we'd send them to the lawyer and they'd give them a free consult. And then they'd say, well, instead of $5,000, it's going to be $4,000. Here's where you hire me. And, a lot of consumers would say, hey, that sounds great, but, that's not really going to make the difference for me in being able to access and afford, to try to move forward in my legal case. And so, we started looking for more creative solutions to try to help people. And so back in those days, it was one of the first things as we started to connect with attorneys that would just provide them help with their documents, give them some advice, assist them with being a pro se litigant. And so this was back in the mid to late 2000s, which, some people, Woody Mawson had already laid some of the groundwork in the late 90s, early 2000s on, unbundled legal services, but no one really knew what that term meant at that time. And it was pretty kind of early days, but it was, hey, if you can't do the whole case, then, why don't we get a lawyer to give you some advice and draft your documents and get you some help? So, we started doing that for under the legal access plan. It was a benefit where people could pay a flat rate to have a lawyer help them with their paperwork. And then we evolved that to the point where we say, hey, what if we we took this model, which was working great, people that, sign up for the legal plan, maybe if we sent 10 of those clients to, one of the discounted rate lawyers, maybe one of those people will be able to hire a lawyer. Whereas, through the document assistance program, we were able to help, 4, 5, 6 clients, sometimes 7, especially when we offered them payment plans and so forth for the document services. So it was really making a big difference in the amount of people that could receive, legal services from a lawyer. And so we looked at we launched Unbundled Attorney, it was, a matter of, well, how do we bring this this education, this model, and these service options to the legal marketplace and educate more lawyers about how to provide these types of services to their clients so that we can start to make a dent on the access to justice problem we have in the United States, and also help lawyers build a very highly, much more highly profitable practice at the same time. So that's been part of the journey here.
I mean, I'm assuming there's some resistance to this from the legal field. And part of it might be I think unbundled legal services is sort of a confusing term. So, I mean, do you meet any resistance from attorneys when it comes to this?
Not nowadays. No, there's been ethics opinions that have rolled out all across the United States in terms of laying the groundwork for attorneys to have the ethical ability to be able to provide unbundled legal services to their clients. There are some restrictions in certain practice areas, mainly the federal practice areas that involve federal law, such as immigration or bankruptcy. You typically have to, if you're going to be helping someone with one aspect of their case, you're supposed to help them with all the way through the 341A, for example, in bankruptcy. But the most applicable is certainly for family law. We've seen applications in estate planning, probate, and those practice areas as well. So in those areas, there's plenty of clear ethical guidance for attorneys to feel confident and comfortable with providing unbundled services. There's just some specific ways in which to do that, which you have to have an agreement with the client, specifically a limited scope retainer agreement that outlines what services you're providing, what services you're not providing, and so you have express agreement between both the client and the attorney on exactly what's going to be provided. So the only thing that has varied a little bit over the course of the last 2 years is whether lawyers can provide the limited appearance. And most states, we've seen it kind of evolve over the many years, have enabled attorneys and even implemented procedures where you have notice of limited representation, notice of limited appearance, which gives notice to the courts that enables lawyers to let them know that, hey, I'm only going to be doing this one appearance. And so that's really worked great for attorneys to have the confidence in knowing they can do the limited appearances. But there are still some states and certain local courts where that can be a challenge, where it's not necessarily going to be as possible to do so. So those lawyers in those regions may need to just limit to just drafting documents, giving advice, and helping people represent themselves pro se. And that is the vast minority of cases. In most courts all across the country now, attorneys can do unbundled legal services a la carte, which is drafting documents, giving advice, and assisting a pro se litigant. And then also now limited scope representation, which is draft documents, give advice, and also do a limited appearance. And then, of course, that relationship can evolve over time on more of like a pay-as-you-go type of relationship. So it's nice to see that they have the legal landscape, and the bar associations have made it possible for attorneys to do this, because that's really the main concern is, well, is that attorneys want to help people, but they just don't want to get in a position where they're representing, being forced to represent a client that can't afford them.
Dave, talk to us a little bit about the access to justice problem. Explain that to our listeners about how, it's funny because most of the lawyers that we know always say that they want to have more cases. So I think there's sort of a disconnect between this idea that people are not being able to find the justice that they need and lawyers saying that they need more cases.
Right. Well, most lawyers would know that over 70%, for example, in civil cases, family cases, over 70% of filings are by pro se litigants. There's a huge need for legal services, but one of the barriers to entry is the retainer, and that attorneys have, long since been providing the traditional model of representation, which means, okay, you got to pay me 20 hours up front, and my hourly rate is $250 an hour. So I need the $5,000 in order to get started on the case. And that makes sense. It's understandable that attorneys would have that concern, a decade ago or years ago, when we didn't have the ethics opinions in place to say, hey, you can help a client with parts of the case and not be required to handle the rest of it. Or you can do it, one phase at a time, or you can, come up with a more creative solution. So, if an attorney's in a position where they're like, hey, I'm going to have to represent this client for all aspects of the case for the, until and unless I can get withdrawn from the matter, then you need a retainer fee, right? And so being able to have a legal landscape, an ethical landscape that now enables attorneys to provide these service options without, having the concern that, hey, I'm going to get stuck on this case, or I'm going to get called into court and all that kind of stuff, has freed up the capacity for attorneys to be able to have confidence in offering these service options. And so that's made a huge difference. And a lot of credit goes to, the standing committee from the American Bar Association on the delivery of legal services, Will Hornsby, Forrest Mostyn, Sue Talia, a lot of the pioneers in the legal industry, the judges and attorneys that have been involved with writing these opinions to give the permission for attorneys to be able to offer these service options. And so now that you have that, then attorneys can be a little bit more creative with the way in which they provide these services. They don't have to charge $5,000 up front. Most of the unbundled services that our unbundled attorneys offer across the country are typically in a range somewhere between $500 to $1,500, depending on whether they're just drafting documents and giving advice, or if they're also doing a limited appearance. And then, our attorneys will typically offer payment plans and able to work around people's budget. It's basically tailoring the amount of service that the client needs to their specific needs and their financial budget, and then coming up with a creative solution, and then offering one flat rate service at a time or one service option at a time. And so in order to be able to provide these services, it's just a matter of learning how to do it, understanding how to do the limited scope retainer agreements, what type of pricing options are going to be most attractive, how to structure those flat rate relationships. And once you learn how to do it, the clients are really happy because most other attorneys down the street are saying the big retainer fee up front, and they just can't afford it. They just can't come up with that amount of money up front. But we found that the vast majority of folks, single parents, I grew up with a single mom, 2 kids, she probably couldn't have come up with $5,000, but, she could probably come up with $500 and, $100 a week, couple $100 a week, and could get legal services that way. And so, that's what we're seeing across the country through the network is, thousands of clients receiving affordable legal services when they otherwise wouldn't have been able to if it was only the traditional model of full representation. And also those attorneys are now, getting those clients and generating revenue and income and building really profitable businesses from clients that they would have otherwise had to turn away in the past when they didn't have the legal capacity to do so. So it's really shaping up to be a real win-win, and is starting to make a difference in terms of the access to justice problem.
So the only way I can look at this from what we handle, the kind of types of cases we handle, we do personal injury. And honestly, I feel like something like this would be chaos for our firm. It wouldn't fit for everyone. But the only thing I think of is like someone coming to us in the middle of the case saying, hey, I've got all the medical records and bills. I need you to draft a demand letter for me. Or, hey, I'm having problems getting my records and bills. Will you get the records and bills for me? So it just wouldn't work for our processes because it would kind of just be right in the middle of everything and chaotic. So explain to me how the process works though on your end, because I just don't think it'd work for us. So but other firms it might work for. So how does that process work from the point that someone calls you to getting it to the attorney, and then how do they deal with it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So typically we don't see very many attorneys offering unbundled services in personal injury. Usually where you have attorneys providing unbundled services is, family law in the estate arena, landlord-tenant matters, and so forth, where there's, documents that need to be prepared. And also you have consumers that are having to pay hourly rates or upfront fees in order to be able to access legal services. And so it's the areas where, whereas for most personal injury cases, it's going to be contingency. So you don't have an access to justice problem with personal injury. You got every lawyer in the sun that'll be willing to, take car accident cases and so forth and, be able to handle those matters. And the clients are not going to have an issue of, being able to afford that lawyer. And so, the most common is going to be family law for attorneys that are especially just getting started with unbundled services. And so the process is, we as an organization, our job is to both provide, resources and training for the attorneys to learn how to implement these service options into their practice. And then on the other side, we educate the public and let them know, hey, if you've been quoted, $5,000 to $10,000 from another attorney, there's another way to, obtain legal services. Here's what unbundled services are. Here's how they typically work. Here's what they typically cost, and show them videos and get them educated on the way in which the unbundled attorneys we work with can assist them. And then once we've done that, then we can go ahead and connect them through our platform based upon the jurisdiction they're needing help with and the practice area they're needing help with one of the unbundled attorneys that serves their local region or that county they're needing assistance in. And so when that person submits that request, we deliver that contact information as a lead to our attorneys. And that's delivered to their inbox and text message to their phone. We also live transfer the clients right to the attorney's office. So client hits the website, submits the request, gives all details on the type of case they're needing help with after they've watched the information on unbundled services. And then that information, that client information, they're shown a screen, they're able to live transfer right to the attorney they've been matched up with, and then have a conversation with the lawyer about their specific needs, and then the lawyer can get them set up for services and get them signed up and start helping them out.
So how do you guys get paid?
We are a pay-per-lead generation service. So it's like an advertising agency. So lawyers pay us for each lead that the client that we deliver to the attorney's office as a flat rate per lead. It's a representation of the advertising costs associated with generating each lead. So they pay us a flat rate depending on the practice area and the region they serve.
And you said earlier at the top of the call that this helps lawyers make more money. How does this help lawyers make more money?
Well, if you can imagine, if you've got 10 clients coming in and you've got lower middle income families, you might have your wealthy person, that 1 out of 10 that has the $5,000 to $10,000 up front. But a lot of folks are not going to have that available. And so if you can lower the barrier to entry and allow people to just make it easier for them to get started with your services. If they don't have, if they only have to come up with $500 to get started, $1,000, $1,500 like that, and can make payments a couple $100 a week, whatever it might be, the average working family can do that. It's just that the barrier to entry is too high for the average folk, for the average person, and so now that lawyer is able to obtain that client, collect that revenue, deliver those services. And there's some boundaries around, how you would go about delivering services. So for example, if you're going to do limited scope representation, you need to make sure you have the full 1,500 or whatever it is it's going to cost for you to do the filing and do limited appearance in the bank before you would actually file the case. You want to make, because anytime you're providing limited scope, it should be 0% account receivables, paid upon delivery. Right. And so, there's some boundaries there around making sure that you're getting those fees at the time in which you're delivering the services. But that being said, these are all clients that would otherwise you'd be turning away. You wouldn't be able to provide them with any services at all. And these folks are becoming retained clients, are usually very grateful to be able to be working with an attorney on an affordable basis, because many of them have talked to a number of lawyers that may not have been willing to offer such creative solutions. And so that helps these lawyers generate the new revenue, help more clients. And then these relationships also evolve over time. They start with doing limited scope representation. That might mean, drafting the documents, filing it, doing one appearance. And then we found about 3/4 of the time, the client goes to court, the attorney represents them. They're really happy to have them there. Obviously, probably made a pretty big difference and kind of realize, hey, this was a little bit more complicated than I thought it was. And I'm really glad you were there. And then they go to the next step, whether it be mediation or whatever's the next step going to be in their case. And then that relationship can evolve. They can, they'll enroll for additional services with the attorney, whether it be another flat rate, or they can then transition to full representation from there. There's a lot of clients that you'll start working with them on an unbundled basis for $1,000, $1,500 that end up, hiring you for the entire case over the course of time as well. So from an enrollment standpoint, it also helps to just get people started with your service. It's because it's a lower barrier to entry. It's easier for the client to say yes and just give it a go and try out your service for one segment of the case, and then have that relationship evolve over time.
Running your own practice can be scary, whether you're worried about where the next case will come from, feeling like you're losing control over your growing firm, or frustrated from being out of touch with everyone working under your license. The stress can be overwhelming. We will show you how to turn that fear into a driving force of clarity, focus, stability, and confidence that eliminates the roller coaster of guilt-ridden second-guessing and mistake-making to get you off that hamster wheel for good.
Maximum Lawyer in Minimum Time is a step-by-step playbook that shows you how to identify what your firm needs and how to proactively get it at every stage of the game, so you are prepped and excited for the inevitable growth that will follow. Name the lifestyle that you want, and we'll show you how to become a maximum lawyer in minimum time. Find out more by going to maximumlawyer.com/course. From a liability standpoint, how does it work? So, and I know that these are allowed, right? I completely know, I understand these are allowed, but let's say that you've drafted, would a divorce petition, would that be something that maybe one of these unbundled attorneys have done?
Yeah, of course. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's say that the unbundled attorney drafts the lawsuit for the divorce. They file it and they end up handling the case themselves or whatever. I mean, is there any exposure to that attorney? I mean, how do they protect themselves? Because I'm sure there is exposure. How do they protect themselves to make sure that they're not liable for anything after that fact, after they've filed it?
Yeah, so that's called the limited scope retainer agreement. right? So the limited scope retainer agreement expressly outlines the services that are being provided, the fee that's being paid, and also what services are not being provided. And most states have sample limited scope retainer agreements. Of course, any unbundled attorney that comes on board, we can provide sample limited scope retainer agreements. But it just expressly makes it clear that here's the services I'm providing. I'm doing document assistance for this divorce petition. Here's the rate that you're paying me. I'm not appearing you. I'm not going to be your lawyer of record for this matter. Some states there's two different kinds of states. One is a disclosure state and one is non-disclosure state. Disclosure means that you have to disclose to the court that you helped that client prepare those documents. Other states do not require that. You can do what's called ghostwriting, which means you can draft the documents and do not have to disclose to the court that those documents were prepared. And so, that's the legal aspects, in terms of, if you look at the ethics opinions for drafting documents, you have to have, informed consent and it has to be, expressly clear on what's being provided and what's not. But more to the point, it's also important to look at it through the frame of access to justice, right? We have, 75, 70, 80%, depending on the court, clients representing themselves, right? This creates a problem, right? For the court system, for the judges, for the bar associations, for the legal aid organizations that are trying to get these people services. And when you have a pro se litigant that has no idea what they are doing, trying to go through the court process, any attorney that's been in court, watching these pro se litigants try to get through this, it creates a real backlog and creates a problem. And so, I think at the end of the day, the courts, the bar associations, the judges, have gone to the point where they say, hey, it's better that the attorneys are providing these clients some help rather than no help at all. And that's really what was so restrictive in the past, is attorneys didn't feel like they could provide them even a little bit of help, because a little bit of help can go a really long way for someone that's trying to go through this himself. So it's not a magic bullet. You're not going to be able to provide, full representation for every single client. This is a way for attorneys to provide some guidance to those clients and assist them with understanding court procedure, how to file, get the document served, prepare those documents and get it filed of the court. And then, like we said, we've seen a lot of states now making it very easy for attorneys to do one appearance. And so that client feels really good to know that, hey, for $1,500 or $2,000, whatever it might be, I can get someone to prepare this case for me, draft the documents, write the written argument, and go to the first hearing. That's really, helps a lot of people feel a lot more confident and comfortable in moving forward with the legal matter, when otherwise they'd be left to do it completely on their own.
So in my experience, there's an inverse connection between the amount, the sophistication of the client and how much money they have versus how much they complain. I find the clients who don't understand my value, don't see the worth that we bring, that they seem to, and then that are hyper cost conscious. I think that they're the ones that end up being the biggest pain in the butts as clients. So, I think I'm sort of with Tyson. I guess this would be good for people just starting out, lawyers that are looking for an entry into a practice area. But I just think that to build a practice on something like this would be really hard.
Yeah. When it comes to the attorneys and their experience working with the clients, I think most of the clients that have been around the block or called at a bunch of different firms and don't really have attorneys that are willing to work with their budget kind of realize that they're in a difficult situation, right? That they need legal help. This is about trying to get custody of their kids, and they don't have the resources financially. And so I would say that most of the attorneys really enjoy working with the types of clients that are able to receive these services, because they appreciate the fact that the attorney is willing to offer a creative solution when they otherwise wouldn't be able to go about it, wouldn't be able to move forward and receive services from an attorney. And then I think the second thing is most of our unbundled attorney, every unbundled attorney in the entire network also provides full representation, right? So, providing unbundled services doesn't mean that all of a sudden every service you offer is unbundled and I don't do full representation anymore. That's not the case, right? And so any family law attorney you're working with, it's like, this is something that you can add on to your practice. You don't have to not offer full representation anymore. And what it does, over the course of time, when we work with lawyers over the course of years, what we find is that attorneys start leading with unbundled services or providing limited scope services first with every single client before they go to full representation, right? Now, why would they do that? Well, because they found that when you do a limited scope retainer agreement with a client, there's always going to be certain folks that you're describing, Jim, right? That like you sign them up, you start working for them, and then you kind of go, you look back and you go, man, this is one I really shouldn't have got involved in, right? Because the client's really difficult, or they're demanding, or they suck up a bunch of time, or it's highly conflicted, or they're the principal client that's going to fight no matter what, and all this kind of stuff. And they're never going to be happy, never going to be satisfied, right? That's going to be a suck of time and energy and really pull from your spirit as a lawyer in helping these clients. And so when you offer limited scope representation, you haven't signed on to the entire case yet, right? You've only started with them. You've only helped them with one aspect. And this is something that a lot of our attorneys will do is, they'll offer them that one initial phase first, draft the documents, do the advice, file the pleadings, and then go for that first hearing. And that's all they've committed to at that point. They file the notice of limited representation with the courts, and that's really all they're on the hook on, so to speak. So if you can imagine those clients when you kind of were like, hey man, I really shouldn't have got involved in this one. Well, what if you could have just not been involved further because you realized that this was going to be a toxic relationship for you and probably for the client, and you were no longer obligated to continue to represent them, right? And so it enables you to start the relationship out. The client gets to try your services out. And so that's why it's it's easier for them to be confident and comfortable with hiring you because it's a lower price barrier. Then they're only committing to that first phase. But for you as well, you get to try out the client and make sure that it's going to be a relationship that you want to invest in long term. And then what will happen is if it goes well in that first hearing, the client's happy and you're happy, then a lot of times those clients will then transition to full representation from there. But you didn't, marry the client from the first consult, because that's just the way the legal system's set up is once you sign on as their attorney of record, it can be very difficult to get off that case, if they're not paying or various different, or they're not following your guidance as a lawyer. And so this gives you additional flexibility to be able to figure out, are these the types of relationships I want to work with long term? And especially in family law, when you're dealing with, kids and emotions and all these different challenges, it's really important that you make sure that you are not taking on too many clients long term that are those 10% of clients that take up 90% of your time. I think any lawyer would kind of know the people we're talking about, and mitigate your exposure to those types of individuals so that you're able to continue to have a passion for the practice of law and feeling energized about helping folks. And those people will take that energy. And so this should give you the additional ability to identify those clients early on and not be in a position where you have to continue representing someone when you have that kind of relationship. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It's all really interesting. It's kind of a mix of, it's like a flip of law clerk, but it's like because law clerk, it's the attorneys, needing work, so they dish it out to law clerk. It's kind of a flip of that, but then also it's similar to like legal services too. It's kind of an interesting thing. Only legal services is free, so it's an interesting thing. So we do need to wrap things up. Before I do, I want to remind everyone to go to the Facebook group, get involved. There's a lot of great activity. I don't know, Dave, if you're in the Facebook group, a lot of great information being shared there. Now, if you're interested in the guild, go to maxlawguild.com. And remember, conference is in October. It's maxlawcon.com. We will sell out, so make sure you get your tickets. Jimmy, what's your hack of the week?
So for me, I've gotten back into my daily routine, and it's made a big difference. Getting up a little earlier, spending some time meditating, stretching, journaling, and reading. 10 minutes each of those things has really helped refocus my day. It gets me off to a good start. So if you have some good habits that you've fallen away from, try to get back to them today or tomorrow and just get back on the horse.
All right. So Dave, we always ask our guests to give a tip or a hack. It could be a book, it could be a podcast, it could be anything. And it's to help people improve their practices. So do you have a tip or a hack for us?
Sure. I would say one of the things that has been most impactful in my life lately is making sure that I take time for the things that I really love and giving myself full permission to be able to spend time doing the things that give me joy. For example, I'm a competitive golfer like Jim had mentioned, or you guys mentioned earlier in the show, but it's pretty hard to take that time. But I found that by taking that time to do the things that I love, and for whatever that might be for anybody else listening, whether it's taking fishing, spending time with your kids, going on that trip, taking time in nature, pursuing that hobby or that passion. I used to think that taking time away from my practice or my business and to do those things would actually affect the business negatively. but it's actually been the most positive influence on our business and my overall enjoyment of what we're doing than anything I've ever done. So take that time for the things that you love.
I think you're so right, and I'm jealous that you're a scratch golfer. It's pretty awesome. Let me ask you a little follow up before I get to my tip. So, like, did you just grow up really young, like playing golf, or is this something you picked up over time? How'd you get so good at golf?
I was actually an ice hockey player. I'm from Vancouver, Canada originally. And then I moved to California when I was 11, and there wasn't an ice hockey rink anywhere nearby. And so, it's like, you got a stick and a puck. And so I'm picking up a stick and now it's a ball. So, maybe I have a little bit of natural talent in that regard, but also just, general passion for the game, played all through high school and college and just love being out there on the turf and being in nature and playing the game and at the highest level. So certainly a lot of dedication too.
I like it. All right. So my tip of the week is I usually give like a website or a book or something, but mine is about, we're opening back up. Things are starting to open back up. Mask mandates are being removed. And so it's just a reminder to reach out to the people that you love and start getting out to see them again and have those lunches, have those coffees, because those relationships are extremely important. And we've not had a chance to really go out and share with people over the last year. So it's just a nice little reminder. I don't know if you really need it, but to get out and see people, schedule those meetings, schedule those lunches, schedule those coffees, and get out to see people and build those relationships again. It's really, really important. Dave, thanks so much for coming on. I think it's really interesting what you're doing. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing about it. And hopefully if there's an attorney or two listening that need to use your services, they'll reach out to you.
Yeah. I mean, the website, if you go to Unbundled Attorney, there's a podcast there where we interview attorneys that have been doing this for a really long time. So you can get a little context around how they deliver these services. We've also got, trainings from Woody Mostyn to Unbundled attorneys we've worked with that can walk you through how to implement these services in your practice. And really appreciate you guys taking the time to learn a little bit more about it.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, Dave. See you, buddy.
Thanks for listening to the Maximum Lawyer Podcast. To stay in contact with your host and to access more content, go to MaximumLawyer.com. Have a great week and catch you next time.